Cheers, Brandel. And yeah, so that's what I mean. They're all web-based. Hello, Brandel.
Hi, Brandel.
Morning.
We may not have much time to talk to you. We're very busy here today.
Understandable.
I don't know where everyone is. Peter is, he's got issues with his dad, and Mark is somewhere off in the wilderness of the English countryside. So, but
Nice work if you can get it.
yes, nothing more dramatic. The transcript from our Friday meeting was supposed to be here. And I asked the guy, actually, no, I didn't. He just emailed me saying, sorry, it's been delayed. He's in Poland, so he's been working on food trucks all weekend.
Yep, that's definitely believable.
Good for him.
Yeah, no, that's why I said, okay, no rush. We had our close friends, Tim and his family, they're from Ukraine, from Eastern Ukraine here this weekend for dinner. And they were updating on situations, and yeah, it's crazy, interesting, crazy, and horrible. But I don't know if you just saw the Swiss have frozen Russian assets.
Oh, no, that's good.
Yeah, that's
Finally
even more
got off
shocking
their
than the
back.
neutral Swedes sending missiles. So, and it's, I talked to a friend of mine who works as the deputy editor for a prestigious organization, not to put on record here. I asked him, do you think maybe Putin's sick and is going to die and he wants to do something? He said what he hears and things is because of COVID, he's been isolated for so long, and you can see the meetings he has with people with a long table. He's grown very paranoid and has been stewing in his own anger at bad things happening to Russia. So either way, not pleasant, but anyway, there we go.
That's, yeah, worrying. If he's actually doing this because he's not stable, as opposed to just evil.
There was a bit of a Brandel in the discussion yesterday with my friend Tim, where he wanted to show me something on the map, and I thought this is where we should have a big VR map we could move around and all of that. But then I remembered, for a moment, I have this thing called an iPad. So we just put it on the table, and of course it was just a large iPad, but in my mind, I was trying to think of it as being a projection rather than an iPad. So I thought that was kind of fascinating.
Yeah, iPads are a lot more interesting than we use them to be at this point. I think that multi-touch is something that it's very hard to get your head around what to do with.
Mm-hmm.
There are very few apps that are actually legitimately multi-touch, especially beyond drawing. There's some really interesting sort of videos and demonstrations of being able to use multiple fingers simultaneously to continue to configure something like type, to have multiple fingers on the thing and being able to sort of squiggle them around to change the size of and characteristics of the serifs, for example. Really, really fascinating as an idea. I haven't written one myself to play with multi-touch on in web, but I think it's a really interesting idea. And then using it as a multi-input controller for some kind of pan device experience as well. Really, really interesting. But yeah, no, I like the idea of being able to position things. One really neat concept that I've seen floating around is using ARKit on a phone that you don't have any intention to look at, but one where you say you have a phone. I don't have my phone. Oh no, I do. Say you have your phone and you're using it like this. One benefit of ARKit is that it lets you know where the phone is, and the primary sort of expectation is that you're doing that in order to do what's called object registration, being able to match the visual appearance of a synthetic object over your digital screen. But if you just vary the information about the 6 degree of freedom position of your phone, then it's basically like a virtual reality controller without the virtual reality, so that you can pass that path through space, and you can see some kind of representation on the Mac or whatever else you might want to do. And then you can also use the ability to configure multi-touch to use that as a way of being able to control things at that same time. So you could have an object like an airplane or like anything else, and then put your thumb on it and use that to control some dimensional aspect of it at the same time as you're piloting the object through making use of ARKit. So a lot of really interesting things you can do there to kind of break down the boundaries between which applications are running on which devices and what sort of inputs and systems that you're using. But it requires just a little bit more creativity in terms of what you think, and what you think an application is, what you think a device is, the way that they can work together, and kind of being adequately disrespectful of the underlying computing sort of medium, which is something that I think is very valuable for systems. You know, one of the first computer programs that's sort of recognizable as being interesting for today's purposes is called Colossal Typewriter, and it was written on one of these giant mainframes, and it was, I think it just about got the people expelled because they were like typing word processing as a term hadn't been invented yet, but they were like, what, writing is secretarial, how dare you sort of harness, you know, put a yoke around this grand and majestic and inherently masculine machine for something that's women's work, embarrassing, like menial women's work. And I think that's fascinating because it sort of underscores the point that as soon as you can figure out how to waste cycles, then you're probably onto something. So that's why I like using ARKit as something as silly as just being a child's toy airplane or something.
Oh, and the thing, just before you guys joined, I was dealing with, I had to send back a hard drive, and I had another hard drive that was an issue for Lightroom. And it turns out it may have been that my MacBook M1, the USB port at the back doesn't work right. So different levels of technology and innovation we're dealing with here at this moment. I had a cable trouble, and you're redefining what interfaces are. Yeah, I mean, the first time I looked a little bit about what you're talking about in different areas is my car. I drive a Tesla S, and the video there is interpreted 2,500 times a second, I think it is. You know, and Keith and I come from very stodgy photographic backgrounds. You know, you take one picture and you look at it really carefully, and you do this and do that. And a Tesla is like, it is no longer a camera. We call it a camera. It's not a camera. It is a view, right? So this phone is certainly not a phone. A lot of people don't even talk on it anymore, right? So I guess for what you're saying, because it is so important what you're saying, we need to give them new names or neutral names, maybe. Because, you know, you're wearing the AirPods, but, you know, there's all this spatial audio, which is hugely important. And
well, I think terminology, it doesn't have to change. It's just what we understand, what we mean when we say something. Like, well, smartphones before the iPhone, they existed.
did they?
Yeah.
They were impressive until the iPhone came along, and then they're dog shit.
Yeah, the Nokia communicator 9210 was just an amazing sort of article.
I had
of
the
technology.
9500, the sort of the proper flip up big one. It was amazing.
Yeah,
But
and Windows CE. Yeah. Yeah. Well, so I mean, one of the things with that is, I mean, that is literally skeuomorphism. It's using the old terminology, or, you know, more explicitly, skeuomorphism is sort of material features of older representations of things carrying through into the more modern
design approach.
Right.
Yeah.
But it's just as relevant to consider what the practical consequences of skeuomorphism within our terminology is, because it likens things to things they were like before, but also makes it makes it clear that those limitations are likely to kind of artificially apply in some measure as well. I don't know if you watched my video on my word processing video. I guess I didn't go too much into the theory behind it, but one of the sort of the issues currently facing word processing is that Xerox is a company. Have you seen Computers for Cynics? Ted Nelson's short sort of series that he has about the fact that the iPhone isn't technology. Really good, really neat.
Some of it, yeah.
But he says like an iPhone isn't technology per se. It's a series of choices about what you pick out of technology as a consequence of what the values of the organization are. And Xerox was a paper company. They were a document company. You know, they made copiers, and you know, it was a little bit more open-minded to think of themselves as being at least document companies. But that means that paper and moving paper around and thinking of things as previews for paper was sort of intrinsic to what it is they were doing. And you know, maybe it wasn't even something that Park was guilty of. Although if you think about what SRI had up on screen, it didn't really have much to do with paper at that point. And the print preview was something that was much more sort of central to the Xerox work. But it means that we most of our good, and you know, I believe it's still currently the case that you know, the PDF is the basis for Mac window rendering, so there are substantial sort of skeuomorphic consequences to that, if only because it's just easier to implement and easier to think about things in the terms of that they're implemented within. Yeah, but like with books, the printed page is one, but also just the number of glyphs that we use is a feature of movable type. We had different glyphs in English, and we got Y, but we lost Thorn and I can't remember the other one, but there are two TH symbols that people used pretty frequently prior to that. And the way that we used we don't really understand the practicalities of the way that we used the hard S that looks like an F, in terms of what was really meant by trying to use a distinct glyph for that. So there, you know, that the condensation and, you know, the German language reforms of the late 19th, early 20th century in order to remove some of their ciliar glyphs was also just a response to movable type. But we don't need any of those things now. They certainly sort of provide some benefits. Being able to smash all the characters within a finger's reach has its benefits. But again, these are sort of limitations based on past requirements. And as such, while that's not an invitation per se to throw them out, it's certainly something that sort of ought to give us a call to consider what the practical realities of letting them along are. Because we can do anything, and so we should start thinking about what we should.
These little guys. I think that's really, really worthwhile direction. I mean, one thing we see in some sci-fi, I think relates, is you have a thing, you put it on a table, and up comes a hologram, right? Of course, if you're wearing VR or AR, any object can do that. And I'm wondering if, imagine if the other way around, like just as an artistic nonsense, you have a shape in here and we put on our AR, VR, and I have to paint. So where I cover it, it appears, right? Yeah, I mean, it is basically insane, the level of technology we have available. You know, I'm sure there's more processing power in the Apple Pencil than the space shuttle had, kind of thing.
There's more power in and this was a few years ago, in the brick than there was in the original Apple. Maybe in the original Mac. In the power brick for the 2017 MacBook Pro, there was more power than in the original Mac.
That makes sense. The original Mac was a work of genius, but very, very simple. Yes. I also remember,
and I think there might be more power in like in the Pencil than in the 68K, than in the first 68K. I think.
It's interesting.
Yeah, sorry.
No, I was just going to say, I remember back in the days with Doug, so it's like 20 years ago, the laptop that I had then, I remember at a Macworld, one of the engineers pointed out that it could do a calculation in less time that it takes for the light from the screen to go from the screen to my eyeball. But of course, you know, anyway, and this is really refreshing, Brandel, because I'm a bit of a techno fetishist. You know, if I need to relax, what do? I go maybe to the Apple website and look at all the exciting things you put up there. And when I was much younger, I would read Mac User magazine, and specifically the ads, some of the articles sometimes. And that's how I know Keith. Keith was the technical editor for Mac User magazine. And, you know, so there is that. The next piece of kit will always be better. So it's really nice for you to say, you know, it's insane. I mean, like, I have two cameras here that I'm working on today. This one is Fuji V100X. And it's not full frame, but it does the most incredible 4K video. Use this in a Hollywood movie, you just can't tell the difference.
Yeah.
And you know, and that's it. Only 20 megapixels. This is full frame, but still pictures, the RX1 Mark II. I print huge pictures of this thing. But you know, appreciating the technology is one thing, being stuck in thinking about it in one way. You know, the thing, if you think of every problem, if you only have a hammer, you'll think of every problem being a nail, that kind of thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
So shall we spend some more time on educating ourselves?
Right. I think, yeah, it's useful to figure out how to wield technology, but it's also useful to think about what it is that technology is and what's harder to think about with it as a consequence of how it's currently framed. So yeah, I definitely agree.
But looking at some of the videos you've given us, the Google presentation, you know, talking about lots of VR interface issues and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And well, there was something specific in there. Yeah, I don't know. I lost my train of thought entirely. Yeah, but you know, when you read in VR or anything, it's nice to have the whatever text presented nicely. You know, having text with a transparent background is great for movies, and that's about it. So there are some things that we've developed over the last 5,500 years, which will always remain probably. But we're kind of stuck with all this crud around the edges, aren't we? Because I still dream of just, you know, being in this room with you guys, having the normal screen, because, oh yeah, one of the beautiful things in the Google one was they talked about foveal movement, eye movement, head movement, neck movement, you know, the different spheres and all that. Makes complete sense. So a 13-inch laptop, I think, is still probably the best space for writing. That'll probably never change, but only for writing, not for editing or not for reading, right? So to have this exploding out thing. Now the meeting on Friday, the one before our meeting, Brandel, with the NIH people, they were really shocked at the problems with the metaverse of being able to have documents in and out. But what is a document now as well?
Yeah.
Well, how metaphysical do you want to get with that? It's a container for information.
Yes, okay.
It's easy
a
to
document
move
is
it about without losing or scattering your information.
Yeah, a document is a frame.
Way of organizing.
Yeah, exactly. It's a frame. This is within the document. This is outside. That's one way of looking at it, for sure. I agree.
Mm-hmm.
I was, so Emily and I, we have gym classes now, or not classes, but with our personal trainer online, of course. And I was thinking it would be interesting to have a piece of software where if we use 2 iPhones or iPads, her receiving software would use that to make full 3D models of 1 or 2 participants. So she could really check the postures. You know, that couldn't be so hard.
No, I mean, the iPads with LiDAR have the ability to do pretty high fidelity skeletonization. I think ARKit generally should be able to do reasonable skeletonization. And yeah, it's like I said, one of the challenges is imagining sort of adequately multi-device environments where you say like, well, enjoy this, configure this like this, and configure that like that, and we should be able to kind of fuse the information from them. That's where
kind of a
there's some
networking
academic. Right, yeah. There's networking, latencies, stuff like that. But in principle, if you can say, here's a bundle of data from this kind of source for this kind of reason, you should be able to kind of permissions pending and everything, get multiple devices kind of sold into the idea of being able to provide the combination of those things together. One of the things that was really cool about Microsoft Connect and the Azure Connect system, it's the depth sensing cameras that Microsoft Research released, and then Microsoft tried to productize and then didn't super do well. But it's Face ID now. It's the depth sensor is the direct lineage of that, because PrimeSense is a company that Apple bought to do that. Like the combination, not just of multiple connects, but also multiple frames of the same connect, so it was never envisioned as something to be used as a mobile sort of tracker, but very quickly researchers just realized they could sort of treat multiple frames of the same connect data as candidates to kind of act as though it's a fusion of multiple sources, and so that you could, it's called Connect Fusion. And it allowed people to create things of vastly higher fidelity, because each frame is a vote, and if you move that thing around, then it means that you have a more votes upon which to sort of reconcile and determine what the ground truth is of the sort of the whole of the surface you're looking at. To the point where I was curious about whether people would intentionally sort of mount a Connect in a mobile or at least sort of unstable way, in order to be able to maximize the vote you got. I mean, you need to have inertial measurement units attached to it with a high fidelity, so you know exactly what the alternation of those views are, but it would be really neat.
What was the photosynth? That's it. Do you remember photosynth? Photosynth with a bit of video. I mean, the way you're talking now, I could imagine taking my phone, going around the room, scanning the room, as is something we can do today, and then putting the phone on a tripod or something, so that instantly becomes the VR environment for our meeting. We choose whose room we want to be in. So maybe I invite you into my physical room in that way. But because it knows the geometry, it should be able to place you in that room. And you should be able to have more of a 3D understanding of me rather than flat.
Yeah. So Apple Object Capture, it should be able to do things like that. And if it doesn't now, then that's certainly, I hope I'm not giving too much away, that it's the vision to be able to be the basis for all of the technology for being able to figure out where things are. It's currently an offline process, but it's the sort of thing that as silicon gets better, and as people learn how to write for that silicon better, that it should be able to become more efficient. But yeah, I think you can download Object Capture. If you haven't played with it before, it's very, very interesting.
Yeah.
The object actually yields PBR channels.
The object capture is amazing, but the room capture, I've played with some of the room capture stuff too. And it's
Does
good.
Object Capture, the app, do room capture, or is it only for objects?
I think it's only object. The room capture, I use something else, but I could imagine for Apple's demo or our demo in a year, where we start with the whole scanning, why are you doing that? And then boom, we're all in this room, and it doesn't have to be AR or VR, depends on whatever you want. And then I would assign where seats are. And once that's done that's my office forever. I can choose to use that or choose to change it. That's really very interesting, because then obviously we can spend some time decorating our room. And by decorating it, that means assigning what part of the room we want to have as hooks, so to speak, for data. So easily, instead of always going, it's like I put this up on this and I put that there.
Yeah, it gives you the opportunity to have a much higher fidelity offline process of what surfaces may be sort of interactively relevant, but also that whatever sort of more manual work is requisite for being able to say which ones are more semantically relevant in terms of the function of certain surfaces within your house. Yeah, I've been curious as to why and this isn't your fault, obviously, Keith, but like why Oculus hasn't done more work on understanding and introspecting the environment in which you're actually in for it. You know, something that should be not a no-brainer, obviously, like some brains, but to be able to get the rough hull of the room you're in such that you could maybe do some low fidelity colorizing of pass-through, because pass-through as the video is useful, but if it's possible to even just do some, and it's understandable at this point that it's a grayscale camera that's being used within Quest, but yeah, like it should be possible to make some determinations of functions, if not direct visual appearance, and give a little bit more visual interest and detail to that thing by being able to kind of paint with, you know, basic ray casting. Like that thing's blue. I don't know, it's not perfect, but it's blue.
That sounds like a real startup company.
I wish that would be built in, would be sort of explored. I mean, it may be, but to my knowledge, I don't know.
Right. Yeah.
But hang on, guys. No. Imagine using your iPhone, scanning the room, putting it in a data thing, going into your Oculus. The Oculus, you know, does the normal environment thing, and you say, I'm actually in this room now, and then you do a couple of alignments.
Or if your headset had the same sort of tech as the phone, so you don't need to do it with your phone first.
Yes, but we're not a hardware company.
But Meta is. That's what he's saying.
Yeah, they are, but I'm just saying that I think that would be a startup company that could get funded.
Oh yeah. There's a lot that would be funded. Yeah, I agree.
I don't know exactly what the cameras are in the Quest headset, but they do appear to have some sort of near infrared capability.
Yeah. So they're I think they're mono. I believe they don't have any kind of biograding. Biogradings are the things that allow like no camera is color, but you make it color by overlaying a pixel grid of red, green, blue, green on them in order to make sure that there's some kind of differentiation, and so you lose the spatial resolution in favor of having some kind of color resolution. But by default, CCDs of all stripes have quite wide near IR capability, and in fact, you have to remove. You've got to cover it up in order to make sure that it's limited. Its sensitivity to the IR range. It matches more of human perception. It's quite fun. One of the things that I've done in the past is pulled out the IR filter from a webcam in order to make it into a night vision webcam, and then put it on my daughter's crib when she was a baby, and built an IR floodlight so that we could watch her and put a little micro surveillance system in our own home.
Yeah, well, had the sensor taken off this, so not this as the filter. And then I just put in whichever ones I want to sort of limit my view to.
That's neat. That's really neat. Yeah, there's a really neat book by one of my one of the people I mentor. Her professor she's an anthropologist and was at NASA JPL for the Spirit. No, not Spirit. Curiosity and anyway, one of the two rovers that were on Mars for a number of years, and they're all false color, and so the ways that they talk about what they intend to do with all of the false color filters really fascinating, because of the fact that it has to be filtered through the human sensory system, but they all maintain an awareness that is not what the colors actually are, and that they're flexible, because we have peak pickup and 3 wavelengths, but they had filters for 10 and 10 different on each camera, so that they had the ability to be able to kind of make models at various points of the entire emission spectra from a given scene, it's really, neat for people to. Yeah, and very interesting for people to kind of be able to move beyond. One of the things that I've always been interested in is we're stereoscopic right now, and we're trichromatic in our stereoscopy. But what if we were to sacrifice stereoscopy to be hexachromatic? So, if you use one eye and make sure that it's overlaid over the same spot, so there's no stereo parallax, but then you send a false color information to it, so that you can multiplex that signal so that you have 6 colors coming through from a single vantage point, then it would be distressing at first, but as we've kind of learned from the basic sort of study of neuroplasticity, is that we'll accommodate whatever you throw at us, essentially. Some people more than others, but basically, if you just do something, people will start to make sense of it. That's what the human brain is. That's what it's for. And so the ability to become hexachromatic, I think, will be really, really interesting in terms of how well people might be able to understand things to do with chemical compounds and the reality of intricacies of emission spectra with the natural environments. Because we see grains, we know intuitively that people who spend more time in nature get to understand grains a lot better, but we don't know how much better, and we haven't done any sort of technological intervention of their naturism, a naturalism, which would be fun as hell to kind of work on.
I think that's a very important point of discussion, because it would be fun, of course, but also the question of what is useful. I believe we have those 3 color receptors, the rhodopsin and the other one, because that is what light wavelengths we get from the sun most of. So, that's one interesting thing. And a thing I experimented with a few years ago was during the day, we're more the blue light, we're alert, our vision is spread out. But then as, artistic individuals, we sit in the evening, warm lights, and we save the world and have deep discussions. And it turns out that the wavelength you get from a setting sun and the wavelength you get from burning wood is pretty much the same. So that the change from when we could start burning wood at night in front of us, that meant that kind of sleepy, relaxed, don't worry about what's going on everywhere mood lasted longer in us. So I think burning wood and the fact that wood happens to be built, well, it's made from carbon generally, of course, that the burning color is the same as the setting sun color has had a profound influence on who human beings are. So the way that colors you're talking about is really, really important. And
interesting.
It comes to be,
I'd like to know more about that. It does seem like it might be a tiny bit of a backronym type thing.
no, well,
Maybe. I mean, I'd like to know more.
Okay, I have an article on it. I actually did the Kelvin tests and all that stuff. Because what I realized is, as an artistically minded person, I like sitting up late in the evening talking to people by fire or, incandescent bulb or whatever. And to have those kinds of discussions in the middle of the day, sitting outside, no, it just doesn't happen.
Yeah. But I mean, is it correlation or is it causation?
Oh,
do we find it restful because that's the light we experience when we are done with the day, or do we find it restful for some more sort of direct biological?
The research that I read that started me thinking about this is that the blue light is light that makes us look around because there could be predators. So it makes our perspective very open and wide.
Mm-hmm.
That it is that, but as the sun goes down, daytime predators go to sleep too. Of course, there are nighttime ones as well, but that changes things. So then we become, everything is dark in the shadow, so we don't have this same kind of looking thing. Mm-hmm. But anyway, that's
another variable is the level of light as well as the relative color.
Yeah, no, I mean yes, it is, but
I'm not saying that's wrong. I'm just saying this is really interesting, and I really would like to know more, because there do seem to be a lot of variables that may have been all covered or maybe not.
Well, I think your questioning is very useful, because also this whole thing about, for us people who wear glasses, we should have blue color tint. It's absolute rubbish. It's just to make more money from the opticians. It has absolutely no value whatsoever, right? But if we are to create these VR environments, I mean, currently, Brandel, you and Adam and Fabienne tend to have neutral and background environments where you have your objects inside. I think Keith and I are both on that matters what's outside. So,
I just don't have a lot of room in this.
Well, also, if we are designing a room for high-powered blah, 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 maybe we should experiment with one color. Now, here's an interesting story about a specific pink. I'll try to remember where I came across this. I've come across it twice, but there was a specific pink color that was determined to be very, very calming, really calming for people. So it was used in hospitals and even prisons. And it really worked. It was also used for some football teams used it in the away teams' changing rooms. So their mood would be altered before playing. But it turned out that the research hadn't been fully disclosed, and it really does calm you down in a measurable way for a short period of time. And then it actually raises up your aggression afterwards. So having it in prisons was not a good idea. That was a clear example of color. It is a special pink.
Baker Miller pink.
Come again?
Baker Miller pink.
Thank you. That's exactly right. But also, we have different people who have different mindsets. I mean, just look at us. We all have 3 very different brains. Imagine if we do the scanning of an office, we all go in there, but we have 3 different colors in that room. We're sharing the room, but it's rendered differently for each one of us. The geometry is the same. But, maybe one of us wants it, even going further than the mood thing, maybe one of us is more colorful and likes, roses on the wall, fine, etc. These will become more and more important issues. In fact, I ordered a book that I think was tried to be delivered today. I'll have it by Friday. On architects working on these environments. It's based on one of the links we had. So I got the book, and it's all kinds of outlandish places. It'll be interesting to see how that works with us.
So what we're going to need is user level prefs for rooms.
Yes, but also very different rooms for different reasons.
This room, when I see it, is this.
Yeah, I think that it will be valuable to also have sort of negative user preferences, and that you would like to have a minimum level of compatibility, commonality with other people's rooms, so that if people are seeing something that's substantially deviating, then you can be apprised of that because I think that being sort of exposed to the same stimuli is something that has intrinsic value, because it means that people are on the same page, so to speak. And so it's like that's not the case with phones already, in terms of the fact that people can be sort of conceptually surrounding themselves with different things. Something that particularly the younger folks on my team back in the before times, when we would have meetings and they would be somewhere else, just not there because they were on their phones. I think it would be useful for us to be mindful of the reality that attention takes us elsewhere, and that a lack of common factors can also have substantial harms if we aren't sort of cognizant of what kind of impact those different triggers will have for us.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of my friends who is relatively heavy on the autistic spectrum, although he's extremely good at not showing it. He doesn't like video because he feels the pressure to kind of look at something. He'd rather be painting a miniature or doing something. I think in these environments, one thing I've told him that I would like to provide for him is for him to be able to just have his avatar be there and go through neutral movements, but he is not there. But you're very, very right, of course, about the shared agreement of what a space is. So maybe that would mean that avatar then is gray or slightly translucent. So everyone knows that this person now has to just step back from it for a minute, but can hear you. And if they can't even hear you, they're completely faded or something. So the whole language of what it is to be in a space will definitely have to be developed.
Yeah, well, And also, I think that sort of points to what is the purpose of providing certain
Sorry,
visual
Brenda.
indicators.
I desperately want to hear what you have to say. So I can't, just one second. What was that? Oh, open everything. Okay, sorry about that. Please continue.
Sure. The one thing that I'm leery of within VR at this point is people providing stimulus, visual or otherwise, that is there for the goal of fidelity, but isn't actually moored to intent or to specific information. So with in your friend's case, it's understandable to want to provide some representation that sort of is an indicator of they have positive like signals for their intent and their attention. One of the challenges, one of the issues is when those aren't moored to any specific reality, they're actually giving you less than no information because they're just information that a system has made up. You know, that's one of the great gripes I have with Ken Perlin. Glory be to his noise algorithm, is that he got us started. Are you familiar with Ken Perlin or Perlin noise, chalk talk, those kinds of things?
Not the noise bits.
So he invented this really interesting simplex periodic noise system, so that it's the basis for most sort of synthetic computer graphics. He's a professor at New York University, but he did a lot of the early computer graphics in the 1980s. So very, very, very beginning of people coming up with stuff. And he made a marble texture for a marble vase. And the way he built it was, rather than taking photos, rather than doing anything like that, he used this simplex noise, this combination of cosine and various other bits and pieces to create something that is stable enough that it looks like sort of undulations, Brownian kind of motion, that for the most part, most things look mostly like. So the veins in marbling look like Brownian motion if you can kind of configure and key it in certain ways. The rustling of grass or wheat in a field looks like Brownian motion. The distribution of leaves on a tree look like Brownian motion. But of course, they're not simply pseudorandom. They're according to rules about what's happening with air pressure through the grass field. They're to do with the various tectonic forces that are sort of acting in opposition to each other, forcing things with pressure and temperature together to create the marble and whatever sort of thermal or physical kind of reactions. And when you make that stuff up, what you end up doing is telling the human perceptual system that there's no more information there. It's just like, yeah, this is good enough, never mind. You know, when in fact, there's a lot that we can learn through looking at real fields. We can learn a lot about the tendency for different stalks of grass to bend in certain ways at different temperatures and levels of hydration or dehydration. You know, there's a lot about what we might be able to tell about the provenance, for example, maybe of marble, by virtue of being able to say like, oh, this is interesting. The stuff that comes from the south of the Taurus Mountains looks like this. Whereas if you're looking somewhere sort of further west in the Mediterranean, there are these characteristics because of the higher sulfur content. All of that is obliterated by having these plausible specious representations being sort of standing as good enough within the computing world. And I think it's done us tremendous harm to have this tradition of giving somebody something that's just good enough to fool them, but not backed by any particular relationship to fact. That doesn't mean that it has to be exactly the same, but what it does mean for me is that fidelity exists to tell you things, you know. So people talk about having higher and higher fidelity models for human faces, and you know, maybe putting gaze and saccadic motion simulated into headsets that don't have the ability to be able to make assessments of that. But I think it would be much better to, you know, like we have lots of really interesting signals that exist within the human face, within our human physiology that we could make use of. Like you could put a blood pressure sensor on a headset, very cheap, just an infrared thing that's pushing into the skin, with enough pressure to be able to do plethysmography, and then you'd be able to oscillate the intensity of the hue of the avatar according to their pulse, and that would be very, very useful in terms of our ability to be able to understand people. If you can talk about the length and the velocity of people's saccades, you can talk a lot about how well they're concentrating. If you for better or worse, you have a good view of someone's iris, you can tell whether they're really concentrating on what they're listening to. And that is more important to me than whether people have proper 5 component subsurface scattering going through the lensing effects of the eye. We don't care about those. What we care about is what things mean. And so, yeah.
Yeah. And
thanks, Perlin, but I hate it.
Well, now we're talking about privacy, of course, and how much we choose to reveal about ourselves. And on that level, I have wondered if someone has analyzed Putin's speeches based on, the camera analysis you can do about blood flow, just looking at his face, because a normal security camera can do that, right? But there is how much we want to let people know about who we are. Because obviously already now, security with headsets, they can record a lot of information that can draw up a lot about who we are just by the way that we move and everything like that, right? So I'm thinking we could have different levels of, well, first of all, just having the headset on your head can be your ID. It's a face ID, it's a head ID, obviously, right? So that's kind of your login, but also to choose how you want to reveal yourself in different levels, but also be honest about that. So you have a general persona that may be a little cartoon-like, but then maybe you go into a meeting of known associates and that then resolves into something quite different. But at all times, your identity is still tied to the same person. And also the thing you said about motion, the great book Metazoa that I keep banging on about, there's a bit in there on how when you see the larger, I can't even remember, when you see animals that move in our tempo, not like this, we can see them much more as being alive. Yeah. Now, how we will be in the space is obviously going to be important, but on these issues, fascinating though they are, I think there are others looking at it. I don't think there's hardly anyone looking at a research document.
Yeah, well, so like I said, my concern with the way that I've observed people working on this part is that they are keyed into the wrong details. Like I said, because people have a basis and a background in computer graphics, where particularly for things like either video games or movies, they serve 2 different but still inappropriate purposes for the context of sort of work and co-presence and co-location within a virtual environment, and that they are there to entertain and they are there to close down curiosity. Essentially, they're there to sort of answer, resolve, and close questions. We're like, yeah, no, this is like a cool panel. This is Marvel, whatever. It's not central to the story. You're supposed to go that way. Don't worry about the shop front. It's a shop front, but it's closed. Don't worry too much about the politics or the dynamics of why they've decided not to have certain articles of clothing in the front door because of the shoplifting problems they've had with it.
This is a good part of that movie that most people hate, Free Guy.
Minority Report. Free Guy? Okay.
Have you seen it yet?
No. I don't really watch media.
Oh, I think you should watch it for this reason, because a lot of the background is doing exactly that, but in a cartoonish way, like a shop would say, shop with expensive things. It's like the developers just couldn't be bothered. So that's a bit of a fun joke to illustrate your point.
Yeah.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, I mean, we still have to figure out a way to take a document into a VR space, do stuff, and then store what you did with it so you can use it again. And then the real challenge, I think, is 2 or more documents, how they are held together. Where is that knowledge stored? Maybe that will be the artifact of something like a phone in that space, where you allow that to be connected to these things, because anchors and connections will become a very, very different thing. I just cannot stand the kind of demos that are all about everything can be done in what?
Yeah. I'd like to move away from the sort of, oh, here is my laptop in VR, here is my phone in VR, because it's like it's another layer, it's another level that we have to sort of then go into in order to then get to our documents. I'd like it to just be a way of accessing it. It's like, you see, you've got documents on iCloud, so then you just go to a device, access your documents. It would be nice if VR could work in those sorts of ways, so that it was, then we need to invent ways of, this is back to the exact problem you're talking about. How do we deal with documents in VR? But I think one way that we're doing it at the moment is not really the right way. It's not just, oh, here is my laptop screen in VR. Okay, yeah, that kind of works, but it's like I've got to have a device in order to look at a device in order to look at my documents.
Yeah. Well, the other thing, sort of purely mechanically, is that computer screens are limited sort of angular range with a very, very high degree of pixel resolution for the purposes of display. So that means that the basic sort of mechanism for display of information is inappropriate for VR, which for the time being is up to 10 times lower, maybe 30 times lower in terms of its pixel pitch. And with like, it'll get better, but it'll remain low for the foreseeable future. So the representation of information needs to be bigger and more ambient in order for us to be able to make the best use of the platform and technology. That's something I'm conscious of.
I don't agree with that. And I find it very strange to not agree with that, because I am a pixel peeper, I'm a photographer, I need X million pixels, blah, blah, blah. But I was with Keith here many years ago when he showed me the first Retina computer. And I realized it wasn't just images, it was also text. So yes, I absolutely love clean text on a Retina screen, no question. But we did work quite well on quite low res screens for quite a while. And I find it's, but the thing is, I think Brandel, I completely agree with you that it expands. You know, we should use the bigger opportunity. But I actually want to hold a little candle to the fact that a laptop screen in VR is actually not horrible.
Yeah.
Laptop screen in VR is a low representation, low representation of the reality.
No, it isn't.
It's very low resolution.
No, it isn't, because there is no reality behind it. There is no platonic typeface, let's say. So it's always going to be represented at some resolution, right? So also one thing you can do, of course, like in Immersed, the people we talked to on Friday, which only do screens in VR, can have a really big screen and have it quite far away, right? So in terms of the value that you get, because let me not, when I said no, I was obviously, Keith, I know you very well, it can be funny, but you know, when you're talking about a printed picture hanging on the wall, I'm all about that. But in terms of what you need to get a useful interaction with your information, I think it's actually quite good. And I'm not saying that to be a Luddite and say what we have is good, let's stop developing. I'm just saying that we don't need to wait for the next generations. It's actually okay. That's all. I'm not making a huge point. We still need to do the expanded world. Of course we do.
Can you use, I haven't tried, can you use a Bluetooth mouse in Quest? One of the challenges I have found is perhaps more to do with the actual fidelity of the input. I know you can put a keyboard in, but I don't know if you can plumb a mouse in.
Yeah,
so if you have the ability to use a pointer.
To my knowledge, no. Having a cursor, which is, I mean, I know these, wherever they are, these things are kind of like cursors or controllers, pointers, which is what a mouse is, but there's no cursor floating around in space that your mouse can then abstractly move. The controllers are like letter points and mice. Very interesting, though. I mean, I wonder how it could work.
Yeah, it looks like Upload VR makes the claim that there's resizable browser windows and Bluetooth. that in February 21? I thought it was more recent than that, resizable browser windows came out. I mean, they're there now.
I mean, when I'm
replicating stuff that we see on a regular computer and want to interact with it in that way, then yeah, you'll need to also build in some kind of cursor and then have some way of controlling it.
Well, when I'm immersed,
inherent in the
I do have a mouse. I do use the trackpad because I'm only seeing the rectangular screen. So I use it with my normal keyboard and my normal trackpad. And I actually think that works really, really well. But of course, the problem is once you go outside the rectangle.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the sort of, you're wearing a device and then it's showing you a representation of another device and then you're working in that. And that just seems like it's too many layers.
No, actually, hang on. I'm not sure because in my experience, you know, I'm very sensitive to peripheral vision. Right. So if I'm going to concentrate, I basically need blinkers, you know, so to speak. But when I work in immersed, and I don't do it that often, first of all, it's not a laptop screen that strains my neck. It's actually up. So here's my screen is at a nice, expensive place. You know, my hands are touching a normal keyboard. So I can work with that really, really well. Ergonomically, it's super nice. Resolution is medium. But here's the thing, of course, that, you know, the resolution increases when you move your head. Right, because the raster of the view and what's behind it, the representation, you know, we kind of build a high resolution image of it. It's almost like through a chain link fence kind of thing, right? So that's why that freedom of movement is so important. But having just 2 extra monitors on the side, I haven't really found a use for yet because Author doesn't support it. So if I could have, let's say, the map here and the table of contents here, which I can't do yet, maybe I would use it. But of course, the dream is to have any kind of rectangle when you want it, get rid of it when you don't, you know, have the glossary and all of that. It doesn't go into the space, but it's still a step.
This is where we kind of need a VR version of OpenDoc. Switch everything around and you have your documents and then you use your tools on the documents, rather than going into a tool in order to work on the document. Yeah,
I think you're absolutely right. Brandel, what do you think of that OpenDoc idea?
I think it's the web. I mean, I think that there's that the web is the least worst, and you know, HTML is the least worst representation for those things, and that, you know, it's worth acting like it can do it until it can't, and then amending the specification until it does. You know, I've been listening to a bunch of people involved in WebXR in podcasts recently. Folks like Vladimir Vakushevich, who made WebGL, and he says that he thinks that web should be a substrate, but that we should throw away HTML, CSS, and JavaScript because they're slow or something. And I just think that that's very silly, and that the web has been such a transformative thing for people's ability to create applications that we should keep using it, even if people have munged and destroyed the ability to view source. I mean, I can still view it for the most part, but yeah. So I agree. I think some kind of open and interoperable standard is a valuable thing for information. If you actually scratch the surface of some of the things that people say about universal scene description, that they sort of are thinking that maybe it could be the basis for a metaverse browser as well. But I just think that the plain old web is the best basis for that. And I'd be curious as to reasons why people think that it can't be, but yeah.
Well, I think what Keith was referring to with OpenDoc is, you know, the idea that it's not an application where you put a document into, it's a document where you put applications into. And you know, I remember talking to Don.
Yeah, nothing further than that, just the core concept of OpenDoc way back when.
But I remember when I talked to Don Norman about this, and I asked him, what are the default tools you're going to ship it with? And he says, oh, that's for marketing to decide. And then I realized the project was dead. That was just absurd. So, but if we
was this in the 80s when he was at Apple?
Yeah, way back. Yeah, way back at Apple when he was ATG thing. But the thing, of course, of course, we're not going to throw away the internet, and we're not going to throw away the web that's on top of the internet either. No question about that. But the notion of, in the physical world, I can buy a really fancy pen or use a really cheap pen, and it's on the same paper, is just so important, right? And to have to, what scares me about the metaverse model today is you have to move from room to room to use different things, and it's just stupid. So that's why, if we can separate conceptually the environment with the things in the environment, so even mentally, you guys could be floating in a space station, I can be in a log cabin, but we're still looking at the same table, I think is really, really important. And if we can apply different ways where what I am doing with my tools, you may not have paid for that software, but you can still view me doing it.
Mm.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I think that one of the big issues is just the foundational technologies, that things like virtual reality and anything sort of containing any pretensions to metaverse are based upon right now are so shaky that most of the people building experiences have to divert most of their attention and interest to those foundational technologies, making sure the fidelity of the hand models or the polygon count of the rooms aren't sort of adversely affecting the experiences that people are having. And then beyond that, it becomes a solution in search of a problem, because they're sort of so fixated on those things that they don't have really much ability, or the medium per se maybe doesn't have much ability to attract people who are more interested in these concepts of interoperation and of documents and of information. And so I think that one of the things that should help is when more people bed down the basis upon which people build these technologies, then there's going to be a proliferation of people who just care less about it. Ideally, it would be good for another couple of vendors to get out there with headsets. So, best of luck to Google. I really hope that they succeed this time.
But I mean, if we manage to get a little bit of money for this lab of ours, I think we should start to make these components. Like when there was the fight over Gopher versus the web way back and all of these things, a lot of it came down to licensing, of course, and everything we do is open and free, but it also came down to what tools were available and useful. So for instance, if we could develop a mechanism whereby you can add a 360 photo or 3D model within a certain spec to whatever, then the environment, when you're in VR, you can easily use that. That would be one thing, obviously. And then also the tools available to you. So, along us actually building and experimenting, we make these available so that they're drag and drop easy for people, can have a transformative effect. Because I'm lucky enough to have the time to listen to you, Brandel, and to follow into this community. And Keith, he even has a job in this now. But a lot of people, the onboarding, of course, to Oculus is awful. And if we're going to allow people to do more than just download the Apple bundled metaverse application suite that I'm sure they'll find a way to put in there, it's got to be because it's so easy. I'm not against Doug Engelbart, obviously, but to get the data and the stuff in there has to be easy.
Mm-hmm. And we need support for proper document types. I mean, we need the Oculus system to behave like a proper OS.
Yeah, that is a challenge. The idea that what's supposed to be allowed to be an outcrop of the weird legal fiction that a phone is not a computer is problematic for many places, because computers and the expectation that you should be able to install what you want on them were a very useful thing to have, and that so many people say no, you have to go through.
Are you frozen or thinking? I think you might be frozen and thinking.
It's a very good thinking phrase.
He actually looks a
speaking
lot like Steve
speaking of
Jobs right
thinking,
now. Thoughtful Steve Jobs.
So yeah, speaking of thinking, people have waking up over in the West Coast.
Okay. Yeah, you're being
Being pinged and asked to look at things.
Yeah, you do that. It started slow today, but it went really well. We just
yeah,
I'll hang up
really.
for Brenda. Oh wait,
yeah.
hang on. I may have a. You'll have to come over and I'll show you properly.
What is that rectangular object?
This rectangular object is called a book, I think. Boo something. Boo.
Right. Show me when I'm over next. Give my apologies to Brendel. Ooh. Very interesting.
I will do. And yeah, I look forward to seeing you. Maybe see you on Wednesday.
Okay.
That would be good.
Yeah, really interesting chat. And it was just warming up, and I have to go.
Yeah, you do. But, hey, Brendel, you look like Steve Jobs having a big thinking moment there. Had that.
Yeah, I've got to run. They're waking up in California and asking me stuff. So really nice, great chat. I'll see you next time.
See you later, Keith. Yeah, so yeah, that was a good range of different topics than we usually go into.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah,
that just really briefly, that thing he talked about iCloud as an example of some kind of cloudy thing. I think that if you and me were in a VR space now and I had a document, we're talking about it, if you were to give me that document for me to interact with, you would probably have to put it in my iCloud folder. If you only give it in VR space, I wouldn't be able to grab it, would I? In the sense of having it later as well.
Well, so if I give you something that means that your system has the ability to display it, I have to give you all of the information to the level of fidelity that you need for display. You know?
Right. Yeah.
So pending any kind of DRM considerations of restrictions of save or whatever, anything that you have the ability to display is something that you have to have had the ability to save. That said, there's not going to be any kind of mediation by default for us to be able to reconcile that what you have now saved is a version of a thing that came from me, and that's where concepts like Git are pretty useful, because you have the ability to manage sort of optional nonlinear versioning, and that's this sort of thing people assert blockchain is good for, but I haven't seen evidence of it. But Git definitely is. Revision control service, revision management sort of software is useful for being able to kind of do versioning and have multiple people kind of make pull requests and modifications and things like that. What we don't necessarily have is that we so to that end, if our files are actually in GitHub and you fork them and you make changes that are sort of affected based on pull requests, then we have a mechanism, or at least a conceptual basis, to sort of have things, share things. And
sorry, Edgar is wearing a real world filter. You'll have to see.
Oh, very nice.
Edgar, come and show Brendel. You look amazing. He's wearing a rabbit filter, IRL. He's coming now. You look amazing. Look at that.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Edgar, that is so cool. When did you build this?
Today.
In what class?
Well, no, just mommy class.
You built that with your mother?
Yeah.
Look at me.
See.
Fantastic. Oh, that's very good. Who was at the door?
It's very.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So the object that, the option of these are interesting social issues. So if you take something out into our room, like the cats, if there's DRM or you just don't want to share it enough, then I will see a texture of it, so to speak, right? But if I also have rights to it by you and DRM, then it'll be something else. So there's got to be some kind of an indication of who owns what in a room, right? It's like maybe semi-translucent or labels or whatever. What do you think? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think it's very useful to know that somebody is interacting with something and having the ability to represent some kind of proxy to show that that's happening. That it would make sense for that to be a shorthand that is established per sort of operating system or arena software, I guess. But I think, yeah, graying things out would be useful. Being aware of what kind of level of disclosure. So, you know, from an application perspective or a document management perspective, you know, having apps kind of using sort of reporting levels of fidelity. So right now, when you build an app, right, you say, okay, so I want to have a menu bar and it's going to have these menus on it, and it's just this and this and this. What might be useful is for application development, and web and now on Mac OS and Windows, people say, like, this is what it looks like for a dark theme. This is what it looks like for a light theme. What might be useful is for application systems to disclose, say, like, so this is what it looks like for the user. This is what it looks like for the casual participant, and this is what it looks like to the stranger. You know, and say, and it may be that it looks like nothing to the stranger, but you know, it might be instructive to say, like, there are two buttons and they're either mashing this one or that one. You know, so having that webby idea of responsive design pertains not just to spatial sort of variability, but potentially to trust-based variability. So CSS per se might actually be the least worst, like I said, like the least worst model that we have for saying, like, this is what it is for this, this is what it is for that. And then the client, as in your system, has the ability to determine what to divulge, and also to say, okay, so I'm only going to send you the untrusted, but this is what it is. This is the style sheet for untrusted, you know?
I think that is a really, really clever way of using the web. I think that's very citable. Yeah, that's very, very interesting. So I'm thinking about in this environment, there will have to be rights and access. It'll have to be really, really important. And as we've seen, you know, proximity to you and your VR or AR, you could actually choose that someone can see your whole room versus other people, you know, depending on, you know, that's also very important. So to have, yeah, so, well, so then we'll have, Apple is already good at being an identity provider. So they already own a lot in that space. They could be doing, they could own this so easily. That's good and bad. I think what we need to do soon, if you agree, is demos that are partly fake. You know, a little
Sure,
bit, yeah, just some video with overlays and stuff, just to get some.
Yeah, I think they're exceptionally valuable. One of the things that I rediscovered recently, I think I might have maybe mentioned, is that there's a group called the Human Interface Device Prototyping Lab inside Apple, and they have that's where Britt Victor was when he was at Apple. But they still are there, and they did a number of WWDC videos. He did one in 2009. There's one from 2014 and a couple from 2015, because they made use of now outmoded technical frameworks. They've been taken offline for the general public, but they were public at one point in the past. And as such, people would have been able to get sort of retained copies of them. And they're just phenomenally useful for that very purpose. Talking about building fake apps. So the manager of the team says, the point of our team is to make fake apps, show them to people, and see what they say. And you know, I think that's a very apt and concise characterization of what prototyping is. It's to answer questions, and the best way to answer those questions is to do them to sort of conduct those experiments as cheaply as possible. So yeah, I agree. I think fake things that are sort of designed for the purposes of eliciting certain sort of responses can save you an inordinate amount of time if what you're trying to do is work out what's experientially appropriate rather than technically.
Yeah, I mean, the Knowledge Navigator way back when video cost quite a bit of money to produce. It was probably CKS who did it before I was there, but yeah.
Yes, Scully has a book, devotes a book, at least a chapter in his book to it. I haven't read it, but I've heard people talk about it, and that he sort of he goes into some detail about the process that sort of underpinned it.
Yeah, that is
a
interesting.
fabulous hat.
It's like an Instagram filter or Snapchat, isn't it? But real. Wonder Man. Do you want to tell Brandel that Mom and Dad saw you play football today, and we heard the coach say that you were one of the best? Do you remember he had to come and stand up next to him? He said you first.
Yeah.
Yeah. Don't talk too much,
Okay.
Ego. We're trying to have a meeting. You're talking too much. That's a joke. Yeah, no, we should look at that. And also, I'll keep trying to write this stuff down.
Mhm.
But it becomes more and more important, I think, to have web accessible libraries. I mean, in some logical sense, we're reinventing, like Google Drives / iCloud plus WordPress. There's a lot of things we can draw on. So, when I talk about academic documents and stuff, to have your bookshelf with you is becoming much more important because it relates to these issues so strongly.
Yeah, I think that especially the sort of ready-to-handness of books, the performability of access is an essential component of it as well. Because we do technically have all our files on our computers, but what we don't necessarily have is a socially legible and comfortable way of reaching for them and then producing them. So you might share a file into Zoom, but it doesn't have the same gestural qualities that sort of match the activity intent of it. And so sort of merging those two worlds to think about, if I were to say, oh, here's this piece of Super Sculpey, and sort of bring it forth and kind of share it around, for that to be sort of considered front and center as a problem for somebody would be super interesting.
I think what we should also do is meet in something like Horizon workrooms, just something that exists, all of us.
Yeah.
And try to, memory cards, fantastic. 128 gigabyte SD card for the cameras just went out. How much do you think it costs?
I don't even know anymore.
£30, like $50.
Yeah.
Right. Maybe we should go in, all of us, and then somehow record it. I don't know how, but where we pretend, we can even draw on the chalkboard or whatever, pretend it's a 3D object. And then we just role play. Is that yours? Is that mine? What do we take with us? Just have a session there.
Yeah. That would be interesting to do. I haven't spent much time in social VR because I'm not a very social person. But it's I think that there are some interesting sort of opportunities for trying to create understanding and information that's reflective of it. Yeah.
I mean, imagine if we just in 6 months get to the point of having a demo where we have a nice enough background, but we open a document, one of us, and then all we're able to do is to take a page or 2-page spread of maybe one of Bob's murals and put it on a wall, do a few basic cool interactions, and then at the end, people can actually choose to take that with them, with some of that recorded or not. If we can do that, that will be a huge thing, I think.
Yeah. Well, so I mean, certainly it's the case. What I've learned about the slow mirror system would allow one to record at least the performance of like a person and their hands, as well as potentially the position of various objects under their control. So you can make a 3D model that is representative of a series of interactions and steps. I think that's pretty interesting because it's not something that one's seen a great deal of in terms of like moving things around and sort of the position of objects being kind of captured in that way. But it would be an interesting start. Obviously, if you're in total control of that, then you have to be responsible for all of the co-presence frameworks and whatever else. But it's an interesting sort of starting point. You know, like what are valuable things to capture and perform in performance?
Yes, and also once we start playing, whether fake or not fake, then in addition to ownership, it's spatial relationship. So I have a dream that at some point soon, other people would say, no, we really need to concentrate, put your helmet on. Mm-hmm. Because it augments the environment. Like the table instantly becomes a map if you wanted to. But that can't just be Siri, Blade Runner nonsense spoken. At some point, you have to have a component of software that has maps. You have to decide, where it's going to fit the table. You have to decide how you're going to call it forth in the future. You're going to have to decide if it was already something on the table, let's say a physical object like a glass, how is that to be treated? Will that be passed through? If you already had a timeline on there, how is that going to be moved? But we can't answer these questions until we live there a little bit.
Yeah, and build a slightest attempt to actually live in that world with a shared timeline or with a shared document that sort of reflects these things. Yeah, one of the things that I've been playing with, I don't think it's worth sharing particularly. I'll take a look at it. Is cutting up the Vision 2050 mural and sort of thinking about what might be done with it at different scales and different representations. So let's see. Yeah, so
how would you do that? Would you, in the olden days, we had image maps, which were great, but there aren't good tools to make them anymore. But I guess you could even use Photoshop and have a specific export of different layers or cuts, right?
You can use Blender as well. So I guess I can share.
But yeah, Blender is a little beyond the average user, though. That's I'm thinking to make it easy.
It is. So here's the mural, but all in sort of vertical slices, such that if you were, if you're in a first-person mode, then you can walk along them, and that's, the sort of the mode of looking at them. That the information isn't necessarily at an appropriate scale right now, but you can start pulling things off like the 2010s to have it as a railing on top or rotate it by 90 degrees. But yeah, so it's a relatively interesting thing to do. So the way that you can do that in Blender is, like I said, it's fairly straightforward. So if you make use of this material here, my computer is flipping out. I guess because it's a colossal texture. Where did it go? Okay, well, so for this thing here, so you have this piece of information. If we wanted to trim it, split it into 3 parts, then you can go in and, wow, my computer really hates me. You can split it like this. So you just add a piece in there, and then you get those pieces that you can kind of turn into distinct pieces.
How could I potentially send you a map view from Author that you could easily put into Blender? What would you like to receive it as if we were ever going to try that? So do you have relevant sort of encoded XY coordinates in your system? Yeah.
So that if you have a picture of what it looks like, all of that information in basically in whatever format. If you have something in sort of more or less plain text, then it should work. I should be able to parse it relatively straightforwardly by just looking at the whatever coordinate stuff and kind of a reference of how that's expected to look. Then those are, as long as it's not kind of encrypted or anything, then it's typically not particularly challenging to pull it apart.
So
imagine, I'm afraid
yeah.
Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, just imagine a document with visual meta, both in the PDF and separately as plain text to make things easier. That has maybe the map view, but also each map item, the one that is a glossary term, you have access to all the text in the definition. Right, then we can do a lot of things like, you click on a term. Well, currently in author, if you double click on a term in the map, that happens to, then it'll show you all the occurrences of that in the document. It performs a find based on that. But I could imagine if we just add a little bit of intelligence with the authorship of giving something a time for dates. And also, because I want to automate all of this, obviously. So that if we build something, and because I'm such a believer in real data, I keep talking about that. So, whatever you write, at the end of it, you click, put on your goggles. If you're in the right environment, you open it up. Darn, it's all wild.
Yeah. The sort of the false security of toy problem data is a real doozy. It's one of the objections that I have to some of Brett Victor's more interesting ideas is that they will do the things that he says they do, but once they get past it, then they may not scale, and they may hit those scales pretty quickly. So yeah, no, if you have a sort of an author document. So what is the format internally? Do you know is it ASCII with stuff in it, or is it binary?
When I do show package contents, I have a lot of P lists, but the main thing is in RTFD. So, actually, this is interesting. Hang on. Why don't I just send you a document?
Yeah.
Or actually, even more. Why don't I just send you a code so you just get a free copy of author?
Oh, thank you.
And then you can do whatever, because when you view package contents, it does get kind of interesting. Yeah, that gets.
So do I download it through? I've never used the App Store before.
Oh yeah, you get it in the App Store, exactly. The normal macOS App Store. You can get the free version instantly, but it doesn't allow it to export. So it's actually for you, that wouldn't make any difference, but I'll give it obviously the full version for ease of everything. But yeah, that's a really interesting point. We have the P lists have a lot of information. So I'll give you the code in a minute when it's generated. It takes a long time for some unknown reason. All you need to do is go to the App Store, scroll down to where it says redeem and enter it there. So I'll paste it here in our chat.
So used to using find on page because it's the basis for web stuff.
Yeah, redeem on the Discover tab. You scroll all the way down, and at the very bottom it'll be one of two buttons: redeem or add money to account.
So it's not on the author page. It's
Sorry, no, this is really not very clever. It's
I see. Yeah, I see it. Yeah. Okay. I had assumed that I would be enter the code on that specific place.
I would agree with that assumption.
I also don't know my iCloud password because I don't use iCloud much.
Do you work at Apple? Are you sure?
I never use. These headphones are the only thing I've ever purchased. And I never used Apple machines before, and I don't use them by choice. So no, not really.
You're so weird.
I've come to appreciate the perspective that Apple has on things, but it's still not mostly for me in terms of the balance of capabilities and requirements that I have with hardware. It is for just about everybody else, and I'm happy to hang my hat on that. It's just that I want different things out of computers, which is mostly I would prefer to have more control and risk breaking them, because I know that I'm not downloading random things from random people, and I like the web and stuff like that. But yeah. Okay, so now does that mean that? So I did that. Where does that mean that I have it now, or?
I actually have no idea.
Yeah.
Sorry, it's weird.
I tried to click redeem. I already redeemed this offer? Okay, but so then does that mean now if I go to author, I get the ability? Yes. Okay. That wasn't. Yeah.
No,
I don't know if I know anybody in the app store org, but I would love to help them make more sense.
Oh, this is so cool, actually. When you make yourself a document in author, and then you do view package content, it's all there. He's done it really cleanly. I forgot about this. So there's a list of citations, comments, cuttings, dynamic view, it's all there. I mean, it doesn't help us completely in VR, but it's a step.
So are the files themselves stored? So when you say the plist, is that the plist to do with data files or to do with the application, or is there not a distinction?
The format is called .liquid. That's my wrapper, because liquid was the original thing, right? And also I did a .author with a Finnish guy, and he just went mad. Anyway, so in the contents, the basic text, I think is, sorry, not I think, it is in the contents. That's in an RTFD. So that's just normal.
Right. Okay, so I have author running. So if you have an author file that has some corpus already, then I can take a look at it.
Why don't you share a screen with me and do a few things that I'll tell you. So then you'll learn it, and in literally 1 minute, you'll have real data there.
Sure. Author.
Awesome. Okay, so just write any old sentence, anything you like. Yes, reading in the brain. Okay. So after okay, so let's make that a citation. So after that, put your cursor after shapes. So you could select the text if it was a quote, but just and then do Command T for citation and type in either his name or reading in the brain or whatever. Oh, that's not good. What's happening? Did you do Command T?
Yeah, I think so.
Can you press the escape key? Okay, just as a weirdness, go down and okay, go up before Stanislaw and add a few line breaks. and then go back and try to do it. Okay, press the escape key now, please. Then okay, now you're full screen. Okay, try it again. What in the world? Okay, go at the top of the screen. You should find, this is very interesting. I'll have to debug. Under tag menu, link and then citation.
Do you see manual entry?
Yeah. I can't. No. Just type. I can't see the dialog for some reason.
But right, because I'm only sharing this application. Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, so do I click search books or manual entry?
Search books. Just type in Stanislas Dehaene or his last name or whatever thing you want.
Oh, neat. So this is actually hitting Google Books.
Yes. Okay, so now we're going to double click on the word text and do Command D for define. Oops, yeah, there we go. And just write any definition, any whatever. And now just select text again, just to be simple. Select the word text and do Command M for map. So now it copied it into the map view. You can put it wherever you want. And double click and write words. That's perfect, words, okay. And select one of those and make another definition, please. By doing Command D, just Command D, yeah. But make sure that that definition either includes the text, concepts, or words.
Yeah, right.
So now when you click about, select all of them. Okay, so hi Bob. Okay, so in the definition for type, can you just deselect and select type and just do and make sure that that definition includes the word text. So yeah, do Command D now and text.
All right, so that they're linked together.
Yeah, but look at the difference between selecting text or type. If you select text, see what happens. Thin line, but type, strong line.
Mm-hmm.
Right, so when you save that document now, that should be in a plist. Bob, you missed the mural bit. We went through that a short while ago.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah. I just couldn't make it this morning. Too many things on.
Oh, don't worry.
Piled up on Monday morning.
Don't worry at all. Okay, yeah. So go to the desktop and let's do view package contents of the sample document then.
Okay. So what did I call it? I just.
Yeah. There you go.
What did I call it? It's a sample document in documents. Okay.
You can just close that, or I don't know, whatever.
I see. Cool. So I can share. I'll share. There are things I probably shouldn't allow people to see on my computer. So we have this document, this file, this folder directory, and it's got an author plist. Maybe you're not saying preview.
No,
okay,
no,
cool. So
we could see it. Yeah, previous good.
An RFD. Okay, so that
Glossary.
So-
Glossary.json. Have a look at that.
so it has some UUIDs, and it has it doesn't have any coordinate data, which is fine.
Hang on, go to dynamicview.json.
There you go. You got a bunch of coordinates. Yeah, no, that's very easy to and then these UUIDs presumably pertain to the definitions in some other.
Probably, yes. I mean, yes,
Yeah.
and that is why
30
you actually have two definitions with the same name, because it's based on that and not just the text. Yeah.
Yeah, so you have that 32E7 UUID. Cool. Yeah. No, so that's all pretty straightforward. And I don't know, is a file like this a zip file? Actually, like
No, it's not. When you go up, it's just that.
yeah. But is it like if I were to go like, oh, it is a folder? I'm just wondering what it is, sort of under the hood. If
It's a package. And
I don't know what a package is.
in this context, a package means that as long as it's registered with macOS, the .author or .liquid or .jpeg or whatever it is shows up with a specific icon, and double click and it does something.
Right, but in terms of
it is still a folder. Yeah.
Yes, so it is a directory.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay. Well, I mean, so the thing that I'll need to do is take an unmolested version of that kind of file format to see what it looks like when you just drag and drop it into the web. Like, so, I mean, I understand that it's a collection of files, but whether that's because it sort of exists as a LZW archive, like a zip file, or if it's literally just a directory that has some kind of special indication. Because now I broke it so that it just looks like it's a folder.
No,
because I added as
if
an extension.
You should be able to, if you go up, rename that folder to .liquid, and it should become that again.
Oh, I see. So if it's .liquid, then it turns that into it. And so if I were to change this PNG to a .liquid.
So Bob, what we're talking about now is of course just a document, but it started with the idea of how someone can easily make a representation to go into VR, starting with the idea of a diagram or a mural. Because the coordinates in the dynamic view /map can be represented in that kind of a way.
Oh, good.
And yeah.
All right, well, that's kind of fun. I mean, one thing we can do, because all of this should be in visual meta, but we could also do the posted on a specific iCloud thing, and then we can start easily having in and out of VR, if that is possible. And my programmer, Jacob, is finally coming out of the woods with another project. So he will be able to make changes to make this process more useful. And of course, whatever we do here will be completely open.
Look
at that, Bob.
So this is not necessarily helpful, but it was just a first batch at sort of thinking about how to separate out the sort of the components of this. So what I've been thinking about is what is it like? Is it helpful to be able to walk along a wall of just one of these? What would be useful to be able to have above one's eye line, you know, in terms of having those as aisles in a store or in a library? What are the sort of the basic metaphors that we might use to understand these things? Because we might have it so that you know, because right now on the mural, the sort of the structure of it is that you have the 2010s, 20s, 30s. But what way we maybe like if you were to duplicate information or to have that the 2010s area be because if this isn't necessarily chronological, maybe we have them as sort of align, like arrangements in a space all together rather than linear. Or we might have, the other thing is being able to use vastly different sort of type scales. And so this headline about forestry, like the fact that it's forest as a set is more important than that subtitle, that kind of byline. And the same thing with the global mean temperature. So how you might sort of sharpen the contradiction, so to speak, of what type scales are doing in different places. So yeah, it was just also just the basic technical test of like, how do I go in with that single board and then start chopping it up and manipulating those things, not with any particularly good idea of what kind of end to what end I'm doing that chopping, but just as that start. So yeah.
Well, that's amazing. I'm delighted to see it. How hard was it to extract these things?
Oh, this is just so you have a JPEG on your site that looks like this.
Yeah.
And it's just a matter of going in with basically a ruler and cutting it. So here, I don't know if you can see my yellow line, but I can go through the thing basically in the same way that you might with a real knife.
Oh, okay. All right. I don't need detail on that. I just wondered how hard. To answer what I think I heard your question to be is it of value to have separate links like that? Well, if we had this in 2010, yes, because I in fact sent the separate long pathways, the 40-year
Mm-hmm.
pathways, to the agriculture people, and to the forestry subcommittee, and to the manufacturing subcommittee. I didn't bother, while we're in draft and discussion and agreement mode in the project. All this was done with 29 strategists, as well as a team of about 6 or 7 who were helping administer all of this. So there was a lot of back and forthing on very specific items. So it'd be very valuable, very valuable to be able to pull that out, show it, to that part of the team without bothering the others.
Okay.
Documents that were done in Microsoft Word generally, and sent around as PDFs or just as Word documents, as how the different teams, the agriculture, manufacturing, energy, et cetera, teams were progressing with their backcasting process. Mm-hmm. Here's what we did this week. Here's what we agreed. Here's what we don't agree. Here's what we still have to find out. All of those kind of questions were behind each of what you have been manipulating as the final thing. And I was always trying to get to the final, to summarize all of the different committees that were working on this. So yes, it would be sometimes useful to be able to take one of the little statements there. There's a statement in agriculture that says that Russia and Ukraine have to increase their food productivity by, I forget how much %, within the first 10 years, within the 2010s. And it might, it would be really useful to be able to link back from that, hypertext back from that to the document that asserted that, or to the
Yeah.
and or to the team's memo that was using that evidence. So those are two different things where we could very easily use the different ways that you're chopping it up.
That makes sense. Yeah. In terms of the sort of the purposes one might have for a document like this, it's interesting to think about, like whether it's a gallery space, like a art, or like a museum that somebody would need to walk through in order to see enactments of various things, or if it's supposed to be a conversation space where people collect in order to be able to talk around those certain areas.
Right.
How and part of that depends on scale. I presume these were large, but but I don't know how large. Like, is this
usually they were about the smallest one we made was 4 foot by 12 to 14 feet.
And so that was, you said, the smallest.
Yes.
Yeah. So what if you had like 100 linear feet, what would you do differently? Or if you had, like a great big conference ballroom.
Well, I had a ballroom like that for the Pull-Free project because we had 4 of these this size. We had 3 scenarios, each 4 feet by 12, and then one summary, putting a summary of the 3 scenarios together on one place in a somewhat more simplified fashion. So we're always trying to aid human beings in their getting to detail and getting to simplification. That's one of the sort of major mental functionings that we're trying to aid with this. And if I had a ballroom, well, you can make these bigger, probably have to adjust some type sizes and so forth, so that people could stand in, farther away, and larger groups could stand. Right now, with the sort of 4 by 12, more than 5 or 6 people around it begins to be hard, because people get in their way, each other's way. I want to go over and see what the objectives were over on the right hand side, while somebody want to see the detail down at 2010. So there's a limit to the number of people that can comfortably, over a period of time, use them.
Yes.
Although it's it's also, as I think I mentioned in this group before, that at least one company that I know about, the forestry company, had this in their boardroom. So the board had studied it to begin with. They had an hour long or so, walkthrough of not only the forestry part of it, but then its related ecological and agricultural aspects and building aspects. What's missing, what I would also put in that big warehouse room that you talk about, would be what we were not able to do, which was to make some kinds of linked networks of these different requirements. Requirements depend on other requirements. I don't think I have to. That's an axiom, and which ones those are would require different people to agree on them and to have some evidence for that. And one would want to then, as you were doing with lines and arrows and so forth just a few minutes ago, be able to link those and travel along those lines.
Yes. So in this body, there are specific sort of dependencies within and between these sort of tracks.
Yes, which we did not, which we only specified in a very limited way, and did not, and I decided we couldn't, that was not what we wanted for the portrayal of the summary of the project, because I had to make some decisions about just what we could do and what I could do, with what I was given. I mean, I was up up to the last minute, the last week, I was still trying to get Toyota and Volkswagen to agree on the items in the transportation line.
Yeah.
So so there's all this kind of dynamic going on with it, which I was just managing like crazy.
Yes, absolutely. And so it's sort of, I guess, one of the things that is sort of intrinsic to it is having an intention for use that sort of dictates the form. And so those conversations, I think, is really interesting. The idea that there would be sort of clusters of people potentially sort of tracking things down. I also really like, your sort of description of the fact that you would want to be checking back with the measures of success, this kind of final row, final column, and the way in which that's sort of similar to spreadsheets with frozen columns and frozen rows, and whether there's a spatial equivalent of that, so that you actually have, so each person potentially has a copy of their measures of success actually following them along, so that at any given moment, even if you're over in the 2030s, then just to your right is your measures of success, such that you can kind of use it as a ruler to identify and see the way in which they're sort of these represent sort of causal planks, dependency things, such that you can kind of, and I guess to fold them, if you had the ability to fold this space, to be able to kind of see the dependencies as they become sort of closer to each other would be an interesting thing too.
Yes, in other words, to slide, it would be very handy. You chopped off the measures of success as a column. It would be very, very handy to be able to slide that over to 2010 or 2020 and see what for the people in charge of that, to see what the distances are that we have to go. Those kind of comparative measures. Yeah,
be able to kind of move this one over.
I will also say that I think I've mentioned before that that this mural was part of the project was also to have a report written. So, and there is a 40 or so page report that accompanies this, and it to some degree it expands on different chunks of information on the mural. And that's another, that one could put those pages in your big warehouse again.
Yes.
So that one could link directly to the detail. One of the things is, as I said, is always managing the simplifying task in order to make some kind of judgments, and then also to get to the detail and to the evidence, which that's what everybody is working on in the projects I've been working on the last 5 years or 6 years or so. That is with the intelligence analysis community. It's all the stuff that all the research that we're doing is open source, but it's the same sort of problem. How do you simplify the narrative of how to understand Vladimir Putin and his psyche and his life history, his narrative life history, and how do you connect that with some kind of judgment about him and what he'll do?
Yeah, that makes sense. That sort of relating of things.
Yeah.
That's cool. I think those are good starts. So I like the idea of.
Oh, and you just flashed on the, yes, you just flashed on the difficult the difficult problems, the little black arrows pointing the other direction.
Yes.
Big risk. We called them the big risks at the time. The project did not, the project managers did not choose to spend a lot of time, a lot of the team time when all like 40 of us got together for 5 days. They spent very, very little time on big risks. Although we did have a session or two that tried to itemize them and rank them in various ways. But I realized if I were going to put it in the summary, I had to not put them all in one big mural, but put them in different places on the mural. And of course, some of those risks are risks to multiple pathways. So, you know, I just said, well, I can't display that in this way. It would be too complex, you know, to try to put, you know, these in different places and so forth, because then people would say, oh, you duplicated or whatever.
Yes.
They would get confused. So, but you know, the whole, you know, again, in your warehouse question, it would be there's a whole serious study of big risks, which we did not do seriously in this project.
So you would say that
we only noted them.
so big risks were cross-cutting. There are causal dependencies that were not portrayed.
Yeah.
They and folding for those dependencies and showing the, what did you call them? The measures of success, the 2050. I also like the idea.
Question of where are we? The question, you know, and I have, you know, if we want if we make a demo out of this, for 2 years after making this mural, I gave a lot of lectures around the world, in Europe, and around the U.S. With different slides shows. First, just introducing the project, but then as we got out to the second year, people were saying, well, how are we doing? You know, how are we doing? Because you've got those 40 must-haves that are the yellow boxes in the 2010s. How are we doing on the must-haves? And so I would do a little bit of research when I could, and I wasn't, by that time I was not employed on the project any longer. So I had to just depend on time that I could devote to it. But I found, you know, maybe 8 or 10 places that I could track some of the must-haves, and that was enough for a slide deck, you know, to give a talk. And those are available. You know, I have those. You know, again, if we were to make a demo, we'd probably want to show how you would use this after it was made.
Yes.
In an update. First, nobody attempted to update it. I did not. Nobody did. Although the pull-free project certainly was, in some sort of sense, this was a fundamental platform for starting to think on it. You didn't have to start from the beginning all over again. You knew what you were going to be creating in the scenarios based on different sets of assumptions. And in the pull-free project, it was not the text that you see was not a set of requirements, was a set of programs of different kinds. So we're going to treat climate change and sustainability this way by assuming that Europe will be the leader. We're going to, in another scenario, we're going to create a scenario where Europe is not the leader, does not take the lead, and civil society does not either, but we rely on the rest of the globe to do it. So there was, there is that kind of connection as well there. But ideally, someday we'll have updates of all of these things that are done, in routine and automatic ways, I hope, or mostly.
You joined us is the authorship of this. How can people actually make this? People who are not necessarily programmers, for instance. But it's 1:15. I gotta go. Would you guys like some more time? I can leave it running a bit, but
I have to drop for 10:15. I mean, I may be back. I may be free after, but I've got a meeting, a work meeting in 2 minutes. But this has been really cool. Thank you for your patience with the mural being chopped up like that. It's pretty ungraceful, but but hopefully it sort of spurs, what might be done with it. And I really like the sort of the duality of having the personally owned document or sort of personal constellation versus the socially performable kind of space that people can reside within, and being able to contextualize between those two things is also a really interesting sort of job I think could be done. So yeah, it's really cool to hear about. I might throw a video of this up just privately between us so that you can see it and think a little bit more about what you would do with it. And I think particularly sort of dwelling on those lectures and what kind of social artifact, like having a large spatial social artifact like that ballroom would be really cool to think about. And Frode, I now that I have that document, I should be able to try to open it up, parse it, and with the simple thing that I have, and then see what and then after I've got that, then you can throw me a more complex document and I can take a look at what it does to it, because that would be neat.
Good. I haven't thought about ballrooms. Most of the experience that I've had is with smaller groups of 12 to 15, and in sort of situation rooms or war rooms or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's relevant too.
Anyway, thank you very much, and happy to get set up a private meeting for debriefing on this.
I see you gotta go,
great.
Randall, but at some point we should look at the authorship side of this, which will be very interesting, how to make anyone do the bureaus under Bob's direction. All right, bye guys, good to talk.
Thanks a lot, guys.
Yeah.
Bye.
Yeah.
Bye.